What's going on, everybody? It's Kevin Hollick here. Hope you're having a good night. So today we're looking through the VFX of Joker Around for Applause. We're going to go into 3 different effects, how I did them. I'll show you all the layers, I'll show you how I did them, show you everything about it. So let's get started by looking at the actual video itself and illustrating the first one. This is the first video effect.
Look at this guy.
So that is not a real TV, not a real vintage old TV, if you can believe that. And I'm going to show you how I did that. So there's 2 sections to this. There is the stand-up part, where I'm doing stand-up, and then the regular green screen with the talk show host. So let's get into that. First, I got to shoot the stand-up. That's kind of the first thing. So let's hide all these layers, and then go into the effects. And I'm going to show you exactly what everything did. So this is exactly how it came out of camera. Raw, nothing added, nothing changed about it. First thing you got to do is color correct it. Color correcting means just changing it so it's the most neutral look for the shot. So, you know, raising the shadows, making sure the brightness is correct, making sure the contrast is good. You're not doing anything fancy, you're not doing color grading or anything like that. So that's the first thing I did here. Is I made it a little bit brighter and kind of tweaked the settings. Now, next up, you kind of need to get rid of the green screen because I got to set a place where I'm actually at. So, I think I did a key light, yep. And it's a little sloppy. You can see, you know, there's some stuff in between my arms and it's not all keyed out, but thankfully because we're shooting this as like a stylized old look for the TV, after the filter is added, it's going to look fine. So next up, I want it to be at a stand-up kind of bar, you know, coffee shop kind of feel. So I found this image on Unsplash or Pixabay or whatever one of those websites are. Super useful for low-budget filmmakers and low-budget photographers just needing some easy pictures. I thought this was perfect because it already had the spotlights that I was looking for kind of like a stage look. But I'm a little bit dark. It looks a little weird. So what do I need to add? I need to add a spotlight. So this effect, CC Spotlight, adds a fake spotlight. And the good part about that is you can just like move it around any way you want. So I just did it like that. And now I'm on stage, right? So I need to speak into something if I'm on stage, right? Well, let's get a mic stand in there. And with a mic stand, we obviously need a microphone. And with these, this was the raw look for the microphone, and that's how it looked when I originally got the photo. Color grade it to make it darker, and then blur it because it's in front of myself, so the camera depth of field kind of alters that. So with all those effects applied, this is a pretty decent look for the stand-up portion. Now, where are we putting this? Well, we're putting it in a TV. So here's the TV. And there's a lot of effects applied to this. So let's get rid of some of these. Okay, so this is what I got. I believe it's from Unsplash or something like that. And as you can see, it's old. That's exactly what I wanted it to look like, you know, kind of 80s look. But I don't like the red, and obviously I don't need the background. So I had to alter that. And so I took into Photoshop and just did some simple work and cut out the border. Once it loads, you'll see. So I cut out the border and cut around just the shape of the TV, and then cut out the TV part of it because we're going to put something behind it so that there's something in the TV. So now that we have that, we're going to place it here. It's in a weird spot because I nested the sequence so that when I just overlay it on top of the actual shot, it's in the same place. Next up, we need to put myself in there, that stand-up routine. So just place that under there, and I think I just did a little masking so that it fits in there, because otherwise it would come out to the edges. So after that is in there, it looks kind of a little too modern, a little too sharp. So what I did is I added a retro filter, which adds some grain, some noise, and it kind of does some color shifting and kind of just makes it faded and that retro look. And I think that's pretty good. And then here for the TV, if I just input it raw, that's what it looks like. And I wanted to color correct it because I didn't like that red that stood out too much. I wanted it to be like brownish, so I altered the color, desaturated it. And then for an edge blur, I just wanted to soften the edges a tiny bit. You can barely see it, but I think it makes a difference to make it less cookie cutter cut out kind of look. And now we're going to go to the actual shot itself. Looks a little sloppy, doesn't it? Let me show you what it looked like before. So this is kind of what it looked like raw. There's a lot of things in here that we just didn't want to move and have to deal with. And I ahead of time was like, okay, there's these white spots that I could definitely mask over and kind of create some just simple color solids and kind of solve that problem without doing all this work. And then this was the other shot with me actually in it. So what I did, so I took that TV from this shot, the modern TV and everything, and I basically photoshopped it out. And yes, that's a kind of sloppy job right there, but we're going to put something over that. So the TV that we're going to replace it with is going to make that disappear. So it's not really anything important that we're covering up. After that, I put on, see right there, these are the solids I was talking about. I just sampled the color and kind of made them their own kind of fake wall looking thing. So let's get rid of everything. There's a blank slate. So put the TV there, put the footage there, and then we're going to put in that background again. And then we put on top the solids, and that still looks kind of bad. What I was going to do is I was going to rotoscope my outline. That's what this part is. And as you can see, I outlined it for every frame. And I used the roto brush, which is a really useful tool. And the thing was, you can kind of see it here. There's some weird stuff happening just because my hair is not only out of focus, but it's kind of just like, there's a lot of kind of particle type stuff with hair, and it's so hard to mask. So I'm like, it's whatever. I'll just deal with this kind of stuff. And what I did for the final one is I just zoomed in. And as you can see, I just kind of cropped out, and I don't think it looks too bad. You probably wouldn't have even noticed if I didn't tell you. But that's how I did the TV replacement, which was a pretty simple, straightforward, but a couple tricks to it, with the masking out the TV and all that. So next up, we're going to do this stuff. The TV show.
So,
this was a pretty big effect, a pretty long effect. There's many layers to this one. So here's everything as is. So let's get rid of the color correction, the first color correction, and already you can see how much that changed everything. And then get rid of the color key. So this was basically what the footage looked like raw. And the first thing you gotta do, like I said earlier, gotta color grade it. So gotta make it brighter because it was a little dark, and bring up the shadows and kind of make the green vibrant. Next up, don't want the green there at all, so we got to key it out. So add that key, and it cuts out everything else. And there was actually a lot of trouble with that, because as the Joker, clearly I have green hair. I'm on a green screen. That is not good for green screen. If you're shooting with a green shirt or green anything, then you usually go to a blue screen, so that you don't worry about that. But I'm also wearing a blue collared shirt, so I didn't want that to go away. So it was kind of a gamble of which one do we want to play with and kind of like worry about later, the shirt or the green hair. And so I took a gamble on the green hair. And as you can see, it actually worked out pretty good. The hue is a lot darker on my hair, so it actually didn't key out a lot of it, which was good. One thing with the key, or with a green screen, is as you can see, there's a lot of like green splashback. When you light a green screen with like heavy bright lights, it bounces that light everywhere. And so there's green light reflecting everywhere onto your characters and everything else. So I had to color correct that back to a normal color. So that kind of removes some of the green tones and adds a little more magenta back into it to make it look more natural and more neutral. And so after that, there's still some problems. Like this desk is a big problem. We need a background. So what did I do? I got some images. Wanted some sort of curtain kind of looking thing, because it seems like talk shows have curtains behind, all the time. So I thought that was a classic thing, but that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted something else. So we added a skyline, and it turns out to be the Chicago skyline because they actually shoot a lot of Batman kind of stuff in Chicago because it looks a lot like Gotham City. So I was like, that'd be perfect. And so what we did is we zoomed in quite a bit and I flipped it so it's not quite as noticeable. And then we add the curtains. And I wanted just the skyline to be very subtle, so you can't really notice it, but you know there's something extra back there. Now, there's some problems with this desk. This was a problem that I did not anticipate. So this is its own layer, and I believe this has kind of a sort of desaturation. I basically just cut out the green desk-ish area and just desaturated it and kind of keyed out some of the green once again, but in its own kind of layer. So it's another layer of that green screen removal. And another thing, I didn't have a desk, kind of like they do on talk shows where you can't see the legs of the host. So I'm like, well, we're on a green screen and a tripod. That won't be that hard to do. I'll just put a solid over it. And look at that. Feather the sides a little bit. And look at that. That's a pretty solid thing. And there's some things that are still a little miss. Like, you can see my hand is a little cut out. Sometimes you can see my hair kind of get keyed out. But one thing we had on our side was the retro filter once again. This was going to be a live show and the film takes place in the 80s. So we're going to add a retro filter. As you can see the difference. It kind of hides some of the color shifting and the kind of edges of things. It makes it look more natural, like it's just on TV. It looks like just the artifacts and the mistakes that a retro kind of old TV has. Alright, the next visual effects shot I'm going to show you is in the same scene. It's in the TV show scene, but it's one of the most important effects in the entire thing, which is...
I feel in control.
The gunshot. That's a very pivotal moment in the film, so...
Control.
How did I do it? Well, let's look into it. So what happens when a gun fires? Well, you have a lot of things that happen. There are flashes, there's smoke, there's blood. It's pretty nasty. So, let me disable all those. And I'll show you one by one. Here's the muzzle flash. I got it from an asset pack that I've had for a while. And so I just, cropped it, zoomed it out, put it in position. And one of the things with the muzzle flash, let's go ahead one frame. That's it. It's just one frame for the muzzle flash. And that is actually accurate. A lot of films have it for a couple frames, which is not accurate. So it's just one frame. It's just an instant. You barely need to see it. Next up, there's a little bit of smoke here, but we need a little bit more. And we need some on the character who's receiving it. There's a nice smoke plume from the gun itself, which we need. And as you can kind of see, the green screen, because the barrel of the gun is so small, kind of cuts it out, but thankfully it's a very fast scene. So, we put in the smoke. It's hard to see, it's very minute, but I wanted smoke coming off the person as well as going towards it from the gun. So, put that in there. And I didn't want it to be like gratuitous and full of gore. So the blood, you can barely see blood. It is almost unnoticeable. Like, oh, you can kind of see it right there, like splashing up. Right there, in the cloud of smoke. And I didn't want it to be, like I said, like violent and gory, because that's not realistic, From this kind of angle, it wouldn't be this giant spouting blood fountain. So I just wanted a little subtle, more realistic look to it. And now the problem, we got all the assets in there, but nothing's happening to the scene. This is a very bright light. It's an explosion that happens when the gun fires. And that creates a lot of light. So we got to make fake light. The muzzle flash produces a lot of light in real life, but because this wasn't real, there was no flash. And there's many ways you can do this, but we didn't have a light to trigger at the exact moment this was going to happen in real life, so I just did it in post. So right here, I basically Yeah, right here. So there's 3 masks for this bright light effect. One around the character. That's very blown out because it's coming straight at them. And next up, I did my character. So basically every side that's facing the muzzle flash. This side of me is kind of in the shade and in the shadows, so I don't need to brighten that very much. So it's really just the front of me, and then I did one for my hand. That's like very bright because that's right by the gun. I even brighten the gun a little bit, you can see. And so that only lasts for a frame as well, because that's how long the muzzle flash lasts. So we've got that. Now there's one thing missing, and it's something I thought about later on in the editing process. I almost didn't catch it, but as you saw earlier, this is a very reflective desk. It reflected the green perfectly, almost too perfectly. And so if there's a muzzle flash right above it, there's got to be a reflection of the muzzle flash. And it's something you probably wouldn't even notice because it's one frame. But I'm trying to be as realistic as possible with the look. So I put it in there anyway. And so now I think that's everything to make the gun part look as realistic as possible. Got the smoke, muzzle flash, the ambient light, and the reflection. I think that sells it pretty well, and I was really happy with it. It was almost too realistic. And so I think that's everything to put in there so that it makes it look as realistic as possible. And I was really happy with the results. It looks really good in my opinion. It's such a quick little thing, one frame pretty much for everything except the smoke, but I think it sells it pretty perfectly. So now we're going to do the Joker running police lights. Right there. If you believe it, those lights aren't real. We did not have the budget for a police car. And that was kind of actually a late idea. It came after we filmed that whole scene and everything. We got home and we were just discussing the scene and the editing of it, and we were like, you know, that'd be a cool idea if we could put like police lights to kind of create that tension that the police are already after the Joker, after what he did. So first thing you gotta do is gotta make lights. So this is in its own sequence. And we've got some curves and stuff, but the important thing is these lens flares. So that's the blue one. And how did I get it to flash? Well, there's things called expressions. And so I just did an expression in the opacity panel. And the expression is called wiggle. And what that does is just like randomly wiggles whatever the expression it's applied to. So if it's positioned, it'll physically wiggle it, but because it's wiggling the opacity, that means it just wiggles in between off and on, you know? So I could normally just keyframe it, but that would take a long time, where you like set a keyframe, change it to off, go a little bit forward, change it to on, change it to off, change it to on, but that would take a long time. So I just did this wiggle expression and it does it for me basically. And then I did it, but offset the red one so that they weren't going on at the same time. And then because it's it's coming towards the camera from a place off, like off camera that you can't see, I basically did just like almost like a fade in so that they get brighter over time. How do I do an effect where the camera is moving? Well, thankfully, and this was not planned on the day, thankfully we got some good points to do some tracking off of. So when you track something, you basically take points on the frame and you want to pick something with high contrast. So this light is pure white and then it's got a little bit of gray next to it. So it's easy for the software to grab onto that and just hold on to it, rather than like something like this wall where it's all the same color, there's no contrast. It would just go all over the place when you try to track it. And then because this shot is rotating as well as just moving, I had to find a second one so that it can reference each other so that it knows if it's rotating or not. So I found this little, I don't even know if this is like some sort of sewage pipe, electronic pipe, I don't know. Whatever that is, that was a perfect way to track it. And then all these little things are all the different tracking points for every frame of this entire shot. And so once you do that, you can apply that right in this panel. You can hit apply. And what I do so it's not destructive is you apply all that data to a null layer, which is an invisible layer that just has that data. And so what you do with that data on this layer is you can parent things to it. So this light, police lights layer, which was this stuff over here, I just basically parent and link to the null. So whatever the null does, which is doing exactly what the tracking data has, that's just going to do the same exact thing. The police lights are just doing the exact same thing as the null. So I don't really have to do any work other than that. Just put the effect on top of it, and it tracks the camera. And as you can see, it moves with the camera. So there's no kind of weird, it's staying in the same spot or anything like that. And that's how I did the police lights. And it's a subtle effect. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy, no 3D effects or anything. But it kind of adds a little more ambiance and tension and stuff like that to the film. So I thought it was an interesting effect to go through. We're going to jump into the color grading. As I said before, color correcting is just making the shot look as neutral and natural as possible. And then color grading is adding that creative kind of filter to it to, you know, manipulate the mood, manipulate the setting, whatever you need to do to enhance your story. That's what the color grading does. So I guess we'll start with the first scene in the movie, the TV section. This is what it looked like raw. So this is out of camera. This is exactly how we shot it. It's a little cool. So the color correcting, I just warmed it up a little bit to make it kind of homely. You know, all the lights in your home are pretty much orangish light, so try to give it that look, and it kind of diminishes some of the coolness that's reflecting off my body from the TV. And then next up, we have to apply the color correction. And that's very stylized. That adds a lot more warmth, a lot more contrast. And let's go into actually the look itself. I use a plugin called Looks from Red Giant, and it makes color correcting so much easier. You can like set all the, it has presets and stuff, and I usually pick a preset and then alter it. So let's just hide all these to show you exactly what each one does. This one doesn't do anything, but so that looks just like, you know, what it looked like before. So we got to add the colors, manipulate the colors, and the classic movie look is kind of warm highlights and blue shadows. It's got that contrast, that orange and blue. So I just kind of did a simple version of that. So it's like blue back here and in my hair and stuff, but warm where the light is. Then we got to alter the contrast in like the blacks and the whites and kind of make them look a little bit better. And then let's alter the contrast a little bit more. And to bring you in a little more, I added a slight vignette. So your eyes just draw straight to the middle, just ever so slightly. And then we alter the shadows and highlights. I don't want the whites to be way too blown out, so I kind of just mess with that very slightly. And then, I don't know if I guess I did add a little more contrast. And that was like the look for that one. And it should be consistent throughout the whole thing. Like this is the phone call scene. That's what it looked like raw. That's pretty neutral as is. So the first thing I did was make it a little bit brighter. It's a little coolish where the light is, which is surprising, but it's trying to counteract that lamp bulb. And so I kind of brought it back to what it looks like to the human eye. My skin looks a lot better. It's not as like pale, and so that's the color correction. And then here's the color grade, but it's the same exact one. As you can see, it's just the same effect duplicated, because what you do is you color correct each clip individually, and then you color grade just the whole thing, because you want to make all the clips corrected to look exactly like each other, so it looks like the same scene, obviously. And then you just color grade the whole thing, and then if you need to make changes to the grade, you don't have to make changes to every single clip over again. So it's a good way to speed up your workflow. Okay, the next scene, that's the running scene. And there's not too many shots for this one, but they all had a different kind of color correction. So like this one was a lot more warm and a lot dingier kind of looking. It looks kind of dank, as the kids would say. So I just brightened that up, added a little more coolness, and added a little bit of magenta to give that like sunset night vibe. And then let's go back to this one, the first one. I did do a reduction in noise because, as you can see, it's very noisy. And I think that was just from the ISO of the camera being so high because it's nighttime when we were shooting this. So yeah, this is the raw. That's very dark. So I had to brighten that up, kind of cool it off to make it look like the film night, because real night doesn't look like what it looks like in the movies. In the movies, it's a lot more blue. So I kind of added some blue to that. And then let's look what the color correction or the color grading did. It just, makes it more, I hate using the word, but cinematic, And same with this one. Just kind of crunches it all together, makes it look nice and crisp. And then here's another shot. I think this is, me running on the bridge. So this is what it looked like raw. Clearly way too warm, way too warm. So I got to cool that down a little bit. And then for the color grade, just make the background kind of, the shadows a little bit darker and bring in a little more turquoise kind of look to it. This one, very similar to that first shot, what it looks like raw. That's out of camera look. Brightened it to correct it, and added a little more color to it, made it look a little more fancy. Next up, train shot. So that's what it looked like raw. Now we're going to change the correction, make it a little bit brighter, make it a little more neutral color space wise. Bring that back, add a little bit of kind of greenish turquoise tones to it. This shot was really nice. I really like these shots. Some of my favorite shots in the movie. Like, it's not too, like, the in-camera footage looked really good just straight out of camera, so I just crush it down a little bit, make it a little bit nicer and contrasty. Then add that color grade. Make it look spicy. Now the big one, I think this is a big one, the makeup scene. This is a big color correction. Like, I think this is the most drastic color correction and color grading in the entire thing. So this is without the color grade. Pretty big difference right there. And then this is the raw footage, a little bit warm. So this is what it looked like raw. Then just make it a little bit more neutral to correct it. My skin looks a little too warm here, a little too yellow. So that's a little more natural. And then that's the filter. Crazy filter. Because, like, this is the color that we're kind of going for, that kind of turquoise green. Oops. That kind of look. So that's kind of what we were looking to do with that. And so let's move on to the next shot. So that was the natural one. Sometimes it's a little dark. Thankfully the camera's pretty good, so it can still make it look decent with that, and pop that color grade on. And what I wanted to do is, because the color grading is a little warm, as you can see, it actually does change slightly, going from me without the white makeup to these shots where I do have the makeup, because my face becomes white, like pure white. So now I have to compensate for that, so that's the most neutral color. So my skin does look a little more vibrant and a little more warm because of the color grading. Yeah, I like that shot a lot. So that's without the color the color grade, and that's the raw footage. Dark, dank, just not looking good. So bring that up, neutral, kind of white color for the white face paint. Make sure that's like the best color white that you can get, and then color grade it. And beautiful. And then the last scene in the game, or in the movie, pretty neutral kind of looking shot. Color grade is up here. So yeah, this is the raw, a little green, as you can see, slightly green. And so bring up that magenta and that coolness, brighten it up, and then the look. Let's see if I can go into look and do a little deep dive on that. Alright, so that's what it kind of looked like after the correction, and we're going to add the colors. It kind of pops up that green a little bit, as you can see over here from the color wheel. Increase hue and saturation of red, increase the saturation of blue, and increase the saturation of green. And now what I did is my suit jacket is actually like a normal kind of magenta reddish color, like kind of like normal Joker would be. But for the movie, it's more orange. It's on the orangish side for the actual film. So what I did in post is I just took the red, and I'll show you in a different shot. It'll be a lot more apparent. I changed the color of it basically. Next was the 4-way color correction. And I kind of just add some blue to the shadows, some warmth to the midtones, and a slight highlight of blue. And then Mojo kind of just brings it slightly together, contrast, you know, punches it a little bit, as they say. And then S-Curve brings up those highlights just a little bit, makes it a little more balanced. Like, you got the nice bright white and you got the nice dark blacks. Actually, this is actually a visual effect I did, and I didn't do it in After Effects, so we're going to do a VFX break and show you what this is. So this is a cover-up. Clearly we weren't in Gotham City, so this had a different city name on it, and actually had the city's name for the police station. So I covered that up, and I covered that up too. I believe it said something. And so now it says Gotham Police. Just a simple little paste, you know. It's a tripod shot once again. Or no, actually it's not a tripod shot. We shot this handheld, but I told my friend to stand back a little bit and be as steady as possible. And I just applied the effect, the warp stabilizer. And if I disable it, it's going to zoom out a little bit. Yep. So what it does is just stabilizes that shot, and I set the setting for no motion. So it's basically a tripod shot. Here's the shot that I was talking about with the... So as you can see, that's an interesting color for my suit. Yeah, that's more natural. That's pretty much what it looked like. And this is the raw footage, what it looked like coming out of camera. Very, very low contrast, you know, very little color. So gotta increase that contrast a lot, increase saturation a bit, and then here comes the look. I'm gonna go into the look panel. It's a little more drastic in this version for some reason, but let's disable all these. And so for this, same deal. It's the same filter. So the red, blue, and green are all more saturated. But as you can see, if I take this little thing, it changes the color of a bunch of stuff. So I kind of made a more orangish look to the suit. And then that just adds a little more punch, a little more contrast, and that brings the highlights and the shadows a little more closer, so they look good. And that's the final shot. And I like this shot a lot. And if you saw from the other watch along, I talked about how we got so many trains, and then we even got like a boat. Crazy. So let's disable that. Color grade. And this is the raw footage. Color correct that a little bit. It's a little magenta-ish, as you can see. This one is a little green. So add some cool tones to it and add a little magenta to balance that green natural look. And here's the grade. I think that's a beautiful shot with the colors, and you got the blue kind of on the flare, because I think there's just a street light above us. Yeah, I really like the coloring on that one. I like this one because this was a different kind of shot. The last shot, almost the last shot. So that's the raw footage. It's very dark. I didn't want to crank the ISO up too much to get too much noise. I'd rather up the brightness in post. So that's what I did. It's a little warm, a little green. So added some magenta and some cool tones. And then added the look, which darkens it slightly, but Really brings out the green in the plants and the grass, and then kind of add some blue stuff to the shed which we found. And that is, I believe, the final. Oh, there's one final shot. I think everything is on here. Yeah, those are just 2 layers. So I believe this is the correct. Yep, color corrected it, brightened it, and then added some sort of filter to it. Just bringing out the warmth, bringing out the blues in the background and on my hair and stuff like that. So that is the VFX, and I did the color grading for Joker Around for Applause. It's always such a process, kind of figuring out what color you want for each shot and for each scene, because each scene, I think, it's more important scene by scene, where the mirror makeup scene has its own kind of feel and completely different coloring than, say, the living room TV version. Like, those are very opposite. And even when you're like watching the whole film together, they kind of play off each other. You go from the warmth, kind of homey feel to the kind of gross, uncomfortable green, and it kind of like, it's that transition into unsettling. You know, he's putting on the costume, he's becoming the Joker, and it, like, the color grading really does have a big purpose in emotion, and, you know, it's part of the plot, kind of. You know, you kind of make the color its own character. And so I work a lot, I spend a lot of time on changing the colors and making sure it looks exactly how I want it to be portrayed and felt. And, you know, everything about it really matters. And so, like I said, last minute, before I was done with the film, done editing, I changed everything. I went back and manually did everything all over again, just to make sure it looked perfect. And I think it turned out really well. I really like the color grading in every scene. I tried to tweak it perfectly to make it look good, but it ended up being pretty well. So thank you for coming along on this color grading visual effects journey. I hope you got some insight into the behind the scenes kind of process that goes on in post-production, not necessarily during production or pre-production and stuff like that. If you haven't seen the other videos that I did, they're also on youtube.com/KevinHollick. I did a history of Joker. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/KevinHollick. You can find me pretty much everywhere else at Kevin Hollick. Same spelling everywhere. I appreciate your viewing, and I appreciate everybody hanging out